Hey YouTube, this is Dustin from Ridgeline Aquatics. We've all seen them. Pictures of coral online whose colors are simply too bright and too vivid to be believed. On the other hand, we've also seen coral in person whose colors are simply out of this world. When shopping online or simply trying to compare the color of the pictures we see to the color of the corals in our tanks, we all want to know if the pictures we're looking at are realistic. This begs the question, how do you tell if a coral picture is accurate? Before I continue, I'd like to state that it is my firm belief that most photographers are trying to take accurate pictures. Maybe this is just me in my wishful thinking, but aquarium photography is hard. So I personally cut everyone quite a bit of slack when it comes to the accuracy of their coral pictures. The exception to this is if you're selling coral that is obviously exaggerated and you're selling them for ridiculous prices. Then I have a hard time seeing your point of view. So what should we look for when determining if a picture is accurate or unrealistic? Well, unfortunately, a well-doctored image is going to be virtually indistinguishable from a realistic photo. However, lucky for us, most doctored images are created quite hastily, and they're really easy to spot if you look for a few telltale signs. Before worrying about if a photo has been edited poorly, you should first determine what lighting the photo was taken under. These days, many shots are taken under either entirely blue lights or a very heavy blue spectrum. The reason for this is twofold. First of all, most corals simply look better under blue lights. Secondly, it is becoming increasingly common for people to use a bluer spectrum on their home aquariums for day-to-day use. Thus, a blue spectrum in a photo is actually in fact more representative than that coral under white light. Personally, I don't consider blue shots to necessarily be a form of deception. But I do think a vendor has an obligation to inform any potential customer if it's not obvious. Higher spectrum lights will make many coral fluorescent pigments appear much brighter than they would look under a whiter color spectrum. However, the flip side is many of the non-photosynthetic pigments will wash out under blue lighting. Whether blues help or hinder coral presentation is dependent on the particular coral in question. Most vendors will tell you if an image is shot under blue lights, or they may simply have a blue picture side by side with a white picture. If you're not sure, you can usually tell what the lighting is by looking at both the colors expressed on the coral, but also inspecting the background and the frag plug. Blue lights, obviously, are going to cast a blue hue on the background and frag plugs. If only deep purple, UV, or actinic lights are used, the background will often be very dark and sometimes slightly tinted purple. A very bright coral against a much dimmer background is almost always shot under a bluer spectrum. Oversaturation is one of the most common mistakes people use when shooting or editing photos. Often, this is done by mistake or because the photographer wants to highlight the color of the coral. The first thing to notice when looking at a photograph is, once again, the background. Is everything behind the coral neon or an unrealistic color? Is the coralline normal purple or bright fuchsia? How does the substrate look? Natural or kind of alien? There are several ways to oversaturate colors, and each results in a slightly different final image. Some methods create a very believable picture, while other methods are very easy to spot. Even if the background is black or edited out, you can often still detect oversaturation. As you can see, heavily oversaturated images will generally feature colors with little texture or color blending. While some corals are most certainly brightly colored, the vast majority are simply not the brilliant neon seen in oversaturated images. Of course, slight oversaturation is much more difficult to spot than the extremes. Gel filters can be used effectively to reduce excessive blue lighting from photographs and are an easy way to get more accurate photos. I want to stress that using a gel filter does not mean someone is necessarily trying to pull a fast one on you. In fact, most Coral photographers use gel filters, and it's perfectly fine. However, if used incorrectly, they can cause corals to take on an unearthly neon hue. This is especially true when darker orange filters are used. If a coral appears eerily bright, if the background is darker or slightly orange, and or if corals appear to have a halo surrounding them, then an orange gel filter is likely affecting coloration. The good news about gel filters is that they generally don't change coral color too much, and they are often much more realistic than the bright blue image you would often get without them. But they tend to make corals appear much brighter in photographs than they look in real life. It's just something you want to bear in mind when you're looking at pictures. Filters can also push the overall color spectrum of the photograph down and make common green coloration look yellow, a much more rare color. Brightness and contrast, or the difference between light and dark, can be employed to make colors look more vivid and bright than they might look in your home aquarium. This method of getting crisper, more defined picture is very easy to accidentally mess up because the resulting image looks normal and certainly feels representative when you're making the edits. It is only after you compare the image of the coral in the tank to your own pictures that you realize your edits went a bit too far. This is often hard to spot unless you have seen the coral in question or the editor went to an extreme. But if the difference between light and dark appears unnatural, it probably is. Color hue can be adjusted in post-processing. What this means is that color can be altered and morphed into a completely different color. Luckily, this is pretty rare, but it is sometimes used to make fluorescent green and yellow corals appear to be simply bright yellow. I have seen this most commonly used with euphyllia, torches and hammers specifically. The tricky part in identifying color substitution is that if it is done correctly, only one coral color will be altered. This makes spotting this difficult, but often you should simply rely on intuition. Does that color look possible? At the end of the day, sometimes it simply comes down to trust. There are vendors that I trust, and those that I don't. I don't know for certain that they manipulate their images, but I'm not willing to risk my money to find out. One thing I can promise you is that here at Ridgeline Aquatics, we do everything we can to take accurate pictures. If you ever have any questions, or simply just want extra pictures, please feel free to reach out. I promise I won't take offense. Hopefully this video has given you something to think about as you browse images online. Try hard not to compare your tank to unrealistic images you find there. And don't go chasing an imaginary white rabbit down to Wonderland in an effort to get your corals to look like the photoshopped images you find. At the end of the day, coral health is much more important than some unrealistic beauty standard created by Photoshop. Let me know in the comments below if this video was helpful. Sometimes just knowing what to look for, it makes the world of difference. Until next time, be sure to check out our website at www.ridgelineaquatics.com. Happy reefing!